Welcome to Posting Information for Military Families with Special Needs. Today, we're talking about the province of Ontario. So we have some experts who've done a lot of research into supports and programs available to families being posted to Ontario. And today we'd like to share that information with you and also make sure that you know we're available for any questions after as well. So I'm Amy McKenzie from the Petawawa Military Family Resource Center. And our presenters today speaking about Ontario are Andy Lynn James. She's the Special Needs and Inclusion Coordinator at the Trenton MFRC, and Rebecca Sousa, who is the Program Coordinator, Family Wellness and Engagement at the Southwestern Ontario MFRC. And then for technical support today, we have Orlando Burgoyne, our provincial lead from the Special Needs and Inclusion Program. So thank you, everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so I'm just going to take a moment to share my screen and then we will get started.
Thanks,
I'll say that I seem to be battling laryngitis, so if I cut out for a moment, Rebecca's here to take over. So everyone can see that okay?
Looks great.
Okay, so again, this is the information session for postings to Ontario for a specific guide for families with special needs. I'm just going to jump right in. So what you should do when you're preparing for your posting to Ontario, as soon as you get your posting message, it's great to act fast. There's lots that you're going to have to do. So first and foremost, contact your local MFRC, let them know that you're coming. They might be able to answer any questions, point you in the right direction, and give you any more specific information that you may require. You can also connect with any local agencies, and if you don't know them, again, the MFRC can kind of point you in the right direction. You're going to want to gather all of your important documents. If this is your first posting, you're going to want to get those all together, and I would recommend kind of keeping them all together in a binder because chances are you will be posted again, and so it's good to have these on hand. We're going to go over in further detail what you might want to include in those important documents. I would also recommend to start researching schools in the area. It's stressful. There's lots of schools. You have French, English, Catholic, private, public, etc. The sooner you can do the research, the better. And then connect with any medical specialists in the area, OTs, physiotherapists, speech and language pathologists. The sooner you connect with them, the better. If you require any assessments or reassessments or medical specialists, prepare for those referrals. If you currently have a family doctor or are being followed by a medical professional, request them to refer you to a colleague in the area that you're moving to. This will create less stress when you are moving, and it'll help you navigate the healthcare system early on. Do not wait until you get here. If you can avoid that, the sooner the better. So the more research you can do, the better you will be prepared. You might just, know that the more research and organization you do prior to the move, the more prepared you will likely feel. Rebecca and I are going to kind of go back and forth on here. So here we go.
Alrighty, so when you're putting together your portfolio for education, we recommend you put together the basic contact information, so the name of the school, birthdays, names of guardians, addresses, emails, stuff like that. Most importantly, information from your most recent school. Additionally, you should put identification documents such as birth certificates and passports or any legal documents related to custody, guardianship, or adoption. Copy of any immunization records is required for schools in Ontario. You might want to put report cards and transcripts such as progress reports, report cards, letters from teachers. If your child has an individual education plan or a psychosocial educational assessment, the new school will need a copy of that. And an IEP is also known as an IPP or a PLP in other parts of Canada, which is the individual education plan. We'll talk further about that later. You also need a copy of your English and French as a second language or bilingual education documents if you have them. If you're looking into going into a Catholic school, you will need a copy of your the baptismal record or the parent's baptismal certificate. You'll need proof of a parish and prior Catholic school report cards if you need it. Depending on the individual school requirements, you may also need samples of the child's best schoolwork, demonstrating achievements in math, language, science, social skills, arts, phys ed, interpersonal relationships, for example, and you can also include any academic awards or recognitions of awards of any kind. Community service or volunteer hours are required for high school students graduating. In Ontario, you need a total of 40 hours that can be done at any time during the high school, grade 9 to grade 12. They're useful to have when seeking bursaries and scholarships, extracurricular activities and leadership experience, and a list of facilities accepted into new teams will also be complementary to any application for scholarships or bursaries. If you ever need a proof of address, all you need could be a copy of a lease or a proof of purchase from a bank institution and or any current utility bill with your address.
Rebecca, something that I learned moving to a new board within Ontario is that they couldn't finish the registration process and officially register you until you had that proof of address, but they were certainly open to receiving other transition information ahead of time. So for families who know, or at least they're trying to buy a house or are on a waiting list, for housing, they can at least go ahead and start with the transition stuff and not wait until they have that proof of address, because that could be some time, right, before they have that.
Thanks, Amy. And in terms of childcare is going to be something you're going to want to look into pretty quickly after you have a posting message. There does tend to be wait lists for childcare. So Ontario in particular has a few options when it comes to childcare, licensed care in centers, licensed home-based care, before and after school care programs, and unlicensed care. Some MFRCs do have licensed childcare centers. They may also be able to offer casual care depending on staff availability, as well as deployment or respite care could be available. Now, not all MFRCs have licensed childcare, but they do have strong local community partnerships, and they would certainly be able to point you in the right direction. And they would be able to help you find suitable childcare. Your best bet is to contact your local MFRC, though. They can tell you the childcare centers in the area, who's licensed, who's unlicensed. I know a lot do have a list as well of licensed home-based childcare centers, and even sometimes babysitting options. So there's that option as well. But again, wait lists are sort of a never-ending battle. So the sooner you can get in, the better. And if you have to be on more than one wait list, I would recommend doing so. And then whichever comes up first, then you can go ahead and go with them. So there's a few differences between licensed and unlicensed, as you can see here in the slide. And if you have any more questions regarding that, feel free to reach out.
So when it comes on deciding which school is best for your child, Ontario has full-day kindergarten, but it is not mandatory for children to attend this. At schools where full-day kindergarten is often offered, parents can choose to remove their child for part of the day if that works best for them. Like existing kindergarten programs, parents will continue to have the choice of whether or not to enroll their 4- and 5-year-old in full-day kindergarten. In Ontario, children are required to attend school once they turn the age of 6. The number of schools vary depending on where you're going to be posted, but generally there tends to be options in both of the public of English or French, or Catholic English or French. Some may require long bus rides, however. The provincial schools for the deaf, Ernest C. Drury, and Robarts and Sir James Whitney provide instructions for students from kindergarten to grade 12. These schools facilitate students' language acquisition, learning, and social development through ASL and English, and there is student lodging available. The provincial school for the blind, W. Rose MacDonald, provides specialized placement programs for students from kindergarten to grade 12 who are blind, low vision, and deaf. Programs include a strong focus on expanding core curriculum in an inclusive and accessible environment, and programs vary in duration and aim to suit the need of the individual student.
Okay, so to ensure a smooth transition to school for children with special needs, parents and community resource persons are encouraged to contact the principal as early as possible in order to give the principal time to consult with appropriate board personnel about resources and programming. I mean, for all students, it's important to plan entry to school, but for children with special education needs, it's a little bit more complex and requires some careful planning and coordination. So if at all possible, if you could set up, whether that's virtual or in person, if you're able to set up a meeting with the school beforehand or even possibly on your house hunting trip, I would strongly recommend that. And I would try to narrow it down to like 2 schools that you're really looking at, and then have your list of questions ready to go and see what they are able to offer and what accommodations they're able to put in place for your child, and if the environment is comfortable for you.
So psychoeducational assessments identify and assist with planning for specific learning difficulties, academic performance, issues with memory and attention, and special accommodation needs. More comprehensive assessments can address emotional and behavioral functioning as well as academic/intellectual functioning. If your child already has one, make sure you have a copy, but also be prepared to obtain a new one if the one that you have is more than 2 years old. These assessments are important for schools to have access so their teachers are able to make assessments and utilize his findings to best support individual needs within an educational setting. By assessing the recommendations and suggesting accommodations, teachers are able to implement appropriate individual education plans, IEPs. An IEP, like I was mentioning earlier, is also known as an IPP or a PLP in other parts of Canada. This is a collaborative planning document describing the special education program for a particular student. It is written by the classroom teacher in consultation with the resource teacher, principal, and the parent. It is a working document that reflects the current program that can be changed as needed. Again, if your child already has an IEP, make sure to have a copy and send it to the school or bring it to the school meetings so that the educators can see what has already been in place for your child at the previous school.
So post-secondary education is something that some of you might have to be considering in the next few years. And given that each student's needs are unique, services and accommodations are established on an individual basis and based on the documentation of the student's disability. Many post-secondary institutions require more specific and comprehensive documentation to show proof of a disability than in normal elementary or high school. Especially we find for the learning disabilities and ADHD, they're going to require some pretty intensive documentation on that. So the incoming students, they're not going to automatically receive the same accommodations at college or university that they have received in high school. So that is something to keep in mind when you are considering post-secondary. Look into it early and be prepared to get more documentation. So deciding between college and university is a tough decision, as it is for everyone, and it's important to consider one's strengths and interests when making the decision. It is also important to keep in mind that there are many colleges with transfer programs which allow students to move to university from college in second or third year. And as you may know, college tends to be more directly career-oriented, more hands-on, and smaller class sizes, whereas university is more theory-based, and much of the instruction is given through lectures in large classrooms. So thoroughly research the institution you plan to apply to. It's a good idea. Actually, I would highly recommend contacting the Accessibility Services Office directly to discuss your needs and accommodations and see what the school can and cannot do, because this will differ from school to school. And do it before you apply, because there's no point in applying if the school's not able to meet your accommodations. So each school will have this office, so contact them. They'll be able to answer your questions about the accommodations and which specific documentation will be needed. And again, that will vary from school to school, so just keep that in mind.
I also want to add that depending on the school, there might be opportunities for bursaries and grants to help fund acquiring higher levels of documentation. So be sure to ask the advisors when you're talking to them, just because those, and there might be possibility of grants to pay for tech needed if they don't have it available. So just ask those questions because it is available to them.
And that is the thing, the school, they do not provide the tech or like the Chromebooks or anything like that, that the high school does. So that is also something to keep in mind.
So when it comes to the post-secondary required documentation, like Andy Lynn was saying, be sure to check the institution and determine what is needed. Each institution has their own policies and procedures regarding required documentation to show proof of your disability, and an IEP from the high school provides background information, but it is not enough for post-secondary supports, and asking accessibility officers is the best place to start. So some common requirements for learning disabilities is psychoeducational assessment conducted within the last 3 to 5 years. For ADHD, a diagnosis by a psychologist, psychiatrist, or physician who has appropriate training in neuropsychological disorders. For autism spectrum disorder, ASD, a medical form related to or a letter from a qualified specialist or psychoeducational assessment. Mental health disorder, a medical form or letter from a qualified specialist indicating the student's area of disability and functional limitations. Deaf or hard of hearing students need an audiologist report, and blind and low vision and vision assessment, and or CNIB registration number. Some schools might also require students to claim it through OSAP. And so just be sure to talk to the school to see if that's a possibility for your student.
So some funding options for post-secondary education. It's no surprise, it's expensive, especially when you have additional costs such as specialized equipment or services. However, there's some good news. There is quite a bit of funding available. There are government loans and grants, scholarships and bursaries specifically for students with disabilities. And every post-secondary institution has its own set of awards, bursaries, and scholarships, and they can be found usually on the school's website, or you can contact through the Accessibility Services Office. OSAP is probably the most popular form of funding in Ontario, the Ontario Student Assistance Program. You can find that information online just through a quick Google search of OSAP. It'll come right up, and it has more information of how to apply, when to apply, and a list of OSAP approved schools and an estimator of how much you will get. It's divided into grants and loans, so some you will have to pay back, some you won't. There's also repayment assistance available for students with permanent disabilities who are having difficulty repaying their student loans. There's also the bursary for students with disabilities and the Canada Student Grant for services and equipment for persons with permanent disabilities. These are grants, so no repayment is required to students with that meet these qualifications. And then there's also, as everyone usually knows, there's scholarships based on merit, bursaries based on needs for students. And then there are just some general one-off scholarships that you can usually find again through the quick Google search or through the school itself. And then, there are some scholarships and bursaries that are available to students with specific disabilities. They are the Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario Roy Cooper Memorial Scholarship, the Justin Eames Foundation for Students with Learning Disabilities Grant, and then there's several available for students with hearing impairments. And again, a quick Google search, or if you want to reach out afterward, I can send you the information, no problem.
One thing I just want to add before we go forward is there is the option when you apply to OSAP to just apply for grants and not have to take the loan. So if you're hesitant to deal with OSAP because you don't want a loan, OSAP doesn't equate to absolutely having a loan. You can apply for it and just receive the grants and not the loan section.
Yeah, thank you.
So just a visual to highlight the difference between high school and post-secondary schools. This can also be found online along with a lot of other great resources and information. If you check out the Transition Resource Guide for Students with Disability at transitionresourceguide.ca. There are about 24 colleges and 22 universities in Ontario. So there are a lot of options out there. So as you see here, we have points to consider when going into high school versus college, and just take a moment to look. Some of the ones is they have an IEP, a formal diagnosis, but the documentation is different when you get to college, university, like we had mentioned. When it comes to informing teachers and professors about accommodations, the special ed teacher provides the classroom teachers with IEPs for appropriate students, while accessibility services develops a letter and will send it out to the professors and students. You are in no way required to tell your professor that you have a disability. If you're having trouble, you just go and talk to the accessibility counselor and they will tell them. And there's lots of different ways to, yeah.
Okay, so for medical considerations when you're moving to Ontario, as soon as you get, it's important to register for healthcare in your new province as soon as you can upon arrival. There is a 90-day wait period to receive the health card and access to provincial funded healthcare. You are still covered by your previous province by up to 3 months, so it's not like you are without healthcare until that comes through. That 90-day wait period can be waived for military families. You just need to bring all the appropriate documentation that's listed on the slide there. You'll also need to, in addition to those, you'll need to bring a document proving your military status. So that could be the member's MPRR or a letter from the MFRC, or if the member is with them, they'll need their ID with them. So again, you are covered with healthcare for the 3 months after your arrival, but the sooner you can get that Ohip status, the better. Sorry, my voice is going. Yeah, so again, apply as soon as possible. You will get an Ohip card in the mail shortly after, and generally you have to show this card pretty much at every appointment or when you go to the hospitals and that sort of thing. And Ohip covers many health services, such as those listed there: appointments with your doctor, walk-in clinics, emergency room visits, medical tests, surgeries, etc. It is important to note that Ohip does not cover prescription drugs provided in non-hospital settings, or dental services, or at least not yet. We'll see, that's on the horizon, cross your fingers. And it doesn't cover eyeglasses, contact lenses, laser eye surgery, cosmetic surgery, etc.
So when it comes to medical considerations, you can also contact your local MFRC to inquire the best way to find a family doctor. It can be very stressful when you have to find a family doctor, as every different jurisdiction has a different process and there can be long wait lists. It's the best thing to do is to do it as soon as possible. And in some instances, you may be assigned a nurse practitioner in lieu of a doctor. And you can sign up for Healthcare Connect at Ontario.ca/Healthcare Connect. This telehealth is available to anyone free of cost, and you can get advice from a registered nurse. This program is provided at no cost to families or the Canadian Armed Forces. Unfortunately, is not yet available anywhere, or everywhere, I mean. As of today, the program is now available in Calgary, Comox, Edmonton, Esquimalt, Gagetown, Halifax, Kingston, London and Southwestern Ontario, mainland BC, Moose Jaw, St. John's, Toronto, Trenton, and Winnipeg. Some of the Ontario MFRCs have agreements with local agencies that families who are able to utilize that MFRC address to apply for services before they arrive. For example, the Trenton MFRC has an agreement with the DSO Southeastern to be able to use our address. Finding specialists in the area, such as OTs or SLPs, etc., as another level of stress. Some doctors will make referrals out of province agencies, but you will just have to check with your doctor to see if they're willing and able to do so.